Добрий день, я рада вітати всіх, хто приєднався до нас. Мене звуть Ольга Атаманова, і я рада вітати вас у медіа-центрі.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Olga Atamanova. It's been 10 years of the war, and today is day 523 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor, and I traditionally want to thank the representatives of all the mass media who tell the world about our heroic resistance and truth about this war. Today we have invited you to talk about the employment of our veterans, about the problems, the needs, opportunities that they have, and the efforts taken by the government and by the civil sector and our international partners in this area. So today we will have a presentation of the study, Veterans' Needs and Barriers During Employment. I want to introduce our speakers today. They are Svitlana Kashenets, Deputy Minister for Veteran Affairs, Ruslana Velychko-Trifonyuk, First Deputy Executive Director of the Ukrainian Veterans Foundation of the Ministry of Veteran Affairs, Yulya Kirillova, Head of the Department of Educational and Analytical Work of the Ukrainian Veterans Foundation, Olga Banderevska, Coordinator of the Military Vacancies Department at Lobby X. Also joining us is Maxim Pilipenko, PR Director at WorkUA. And about to join us online is Vitaly Kocherenko, veteran employer, founder of the Company for Humanitarian Demining of the Occupied Territories. So I'm happy to see all of you here, and I would like to start with the presentation of this study. Ms. Yulya, can we please start the presentation? And can you please tell us about the methods and what were the conclusions drawn from your study? Good afternoon, dear colleagues. So today we are about to tell you about the study that our team was working on about 2 months. The study is called The Needs and Barriers During Employment of the Veterans. It was going on for 2 months and was started in June. Within this period, we have studied a number of aspects. In fact, the study was consisting of office and field part. We've studied the current situation in the job market and what are the studies and or research works and programs that were going on within the last couple of years in Ukraine, those regarding the employment of the veterans. We've also studied an international experience available from other countries where the programs for veterans were implemented to reintegrate them into civil life. And our empiric part was made up of the profound interviews with the employers. There were 10 such interviews from the employers in different economic sectors. Another part was online questioning of the employers that consisted of 475 respondents. There was also another anonymous questioning of servicemen and veterans that covered an audience of 794 respondents. Upon the results of the in-depth interviews, we were able to find out a number of aspects, and our in-depth interviews were made up of a couple of blocks. First block was dedicated to the perception of the veteran as an employee and experience of cooperation with veterans. Another block was support by the employers of the veterans, and yet another block was dedicated to the support of the employers by the government for employment of veterans. And we may say that for the time being, the experience of employment of veterans is not a widespread phenomenon. However, for the time being, it becomes more and more widespread because a significant part of the servicemen are currently mobilized, and they are employees who are being demobilized, who are retiring due to health conditions, and so on and so forth. Also, there is a correlation between the experience of the veterans and their attitude to the process of adaptation, and it mostly depends on the sphere, on the or economic sector where we were performing the questioning. So we were questioning the employees in the sectors of engineering who are more prone to support of the veterans in this sector, as well as employers who are more prone to employment of the veterans, because they think that the practical skills obtained by the veterans during their military service may make them prospective employees. At the same time, in the IT sector, it's considered that certain measures for adaptation of the veterans is not feasible, because in that area more of a human-centric approach is being applied, and they treat the needs of every employee independently of their experience and status with specific attention. Also worth mentioning is the experience of employment of veterans by veteran employers. This experience is not so well studied so far, but the employment of brothers in arms and their adaptation in the working environment may be of use for other employers. So based on that, we could further on develop some programs for adaptation and support in the workplaces. Talking about an image of the veteran and association with this image, the employers focus on the veteran as a person without dependence on its experience, gender, age, and among the personal qualities associated with the image of the veteran, the veterans emphasize the civil position, bravery, responsibility, straightforwardness, and meticulousness. Among the risks and among the risks associated with the veterans, there was no such thing as a loss of competence, for example, but the employers stressed the unstable emotional condition that may influence in their efficiency in the workspace, and the support of the veterans provided by the employers is expressed as additional services of psychological support for the demobilized colleagues and the collective in general, as well as legal advice to mobilized and demobilized employees. And another widespread threat is the prioritization of the candidates in employment among the demobilized servicemen and the veterans. Generally, the employers are open to responding to veterans' needs, and they admit additional vacations, training, individual working schedule, adaptation of the workplace based on the needs of the employee, and retraining inside of the companies. Based on the opinion of the employers, the government can perceive the veterans as employees by providing them an additional adaptation period and taking care of the veterans as prospective employees with unique experience. For example, we were asking about such a widespread practice as a quoting of disabled, that employers do not deem it as something important. However, they favor more the tax exemptions and opportunities for development of their businesses. Based on the experience of the employers, the cooperation with the state employment centers does not result in anything tangible, and employers estimated the services of the government as low quality and the training services as those using obsolete techniques. So the employment centers may play their important role. However, it's important also to correspond to the actual demands and needs of the veterans and to improve. And upon the results of the in-depth interviews within our first study, the data demonstrates the tendency of destruction of stereotypes about or debunking of stereotypes about the veterans in the working environment. So it's not only veterans who need some support, but in fact we need, as it was said, to adapt not only to adapt veterans to the civil life, but generally our whole socium to the needs and conditions and challenges that we're facing for the time being. During our empiric component, we had two questions, online questioning in cooperation with platform Lobby X and for employment of veterans. It was going on from 17th June until 17th of July. We also performed an anonymous question of the veterans online. This online question, as I mentioned, covered 794 veterans or active servicemen. And the question of employers covered 475 employers. 41.26% of which are medium-sized business, 30.95% are small-sized business, 14.32% are large businesses, 4.2% was macro business, and also the respondents represented government sector and upon such a complex research of needs and obstacles that the veterans may face during their employment, we identified such entry points and differences that are already existing or may arise or may influence the process of employment of the veterans in their civil lives. On top of that, the absolute majority of employers questioned by us deem it necessary to develop the culture of respect to the veterans, not only inside the society but also in their working collective, because the veterans are the people, as we've already said, with unique experience who have gained new competencies during their military service, and they may become prospective workers or employees. Regardless, the lack of experience of recruiting of veterans and the negative indicators of work with the veterans, about 71% of the employers think that one of the key features of the veterans is emotional instability. Among the positive features listed by the employers, they emphasize the active civil position, responsibility, stress resistance, and industriosity. The emergence of such qualities was mentioned by the veterans in the anonymous questioning. However, the emotional instability is not so much expressed in that questioning, and they have different opinions regarding the characteristics that influence the further employment. About half of them agree that such changes will mostly be favorable in that process. The main concerns are the ability to cooperate in the collective. That was the opinion expressed both by the employers and the veterans and themselves, talking about the problems with physical health. Is 28% emphasized this problem, and psycho-emotional condition was emphasized by 25, almost 26%. Those are the concerns that are mentioned during the employment, and in practice these risks are rarely verified, and the opinion about some unstable psycho-emotional condition of the veteran influences their acceptance as the candidate for a position. And at the same time, about 30% of the employers questioned by us say that the presence of a veteran in the working collective may positively influence the internal communication inside the collective. None of the groups questioned by us do not express some influence of war on the competences and skills. However, the military who were questioned perceived the loss of their competences and skills and a high competition in the job market as a serious obstacle for employment. And moreover, the more and more employers focus their attention on that, and in the opinion of 52% of the veterans and servicemen questioned by us after demobilization, they think that most of the veterans are about to lose their previous skills and they will need additional retraining. Based on the results of the study, the most of the employers find out about the military experience of the veterans during the job interview, and those who take such experience neutrally makes for a third of the employers, and those who perceive the status of veteran as a negative feature, it's a smaller fraction, however, accounting for 32%, and it results that in effect that not all of the veterans state about their military experience during their employment and job interviews. So, talking about the support of the veterans that can be provided by the employers, in the opinion of the employers, the veterans are about to need support in such areas as continuation of the adaptation period, adaptation trainings, retraining, training courses, mentorship. And for the majority of the veterans questioned by us, more important is the support in retraining and acquisition of additional skills rather than additional adaptation conditions that are being paid more attention by the employers. Today, more than 60% of the employers questioned employ mobilized employees. The companies and organizations don't have adaptation programs, at least those that we were questioning. They plan on establishing such programs, and the majority of the employers think that the adaptation measures are necessary for continuation of their employment by the mobilized employees, and the majority of the servicemen and veterans think that in future they will need such an adaptation program. And upon the results of our questioning during this study, the needs and barriers for employment of veterans, they stressed the debunking of stereotypes about veterans in the working environment, and the employers who have experience of employing veterans, they recommend working not only on adaptation of the veterans but the working collective in general, and to a certain extent not to idealize the image of the veteran or to impose it on the society, or by saying that they are just good people, but they should communicate the idea that those are professional, high-skilled young people. And upon the results of the previous study, we were able to find out that the veterans are mostly men and women of the young age, and in fact they are the future of our economy, of our country, and it's a huge potential that we will need during our post-war recovery. Thank you very much, Miss Yulya. We understand that we have a long road ahead of us. Many veterans will be coming back, and as an adaptation they will need employment, and based on what Ms. Yulya has presented today, we see that the veterans don't rush to state about their military experience. It's one of the barriers probably, because if they don't mention it, and we've seen on the slides that many employers don't have experience of employment of veterans. So generally, what are the steps taken by the government to get the ball rolling? We understand that it's not about retraining of the veterans, but it's also on the part of the employers. What is the work going on with them? Good afternoon, dear friends. A veteran from Lviv region was visiting us yesterday, and he was sharing the experience of him meeting his brothers in arms in his workplace. He is a mentor in his organization. He works in IT sector, and he wants this experience to be copied by other companies. But during our conversation, we discussed a number of problems that may be faced by the employers. Many people will be coming back from war, and many employers would not be able to train such mentors who would help to adapt the veterans in the workplace. Kirillova has his studies in the battalion where he was serving, and one of the problems highlighted by his brothers in arms is the employment. They are concerned that as they come back, they won't be able to find normal jobs. They won't be able to acquire skills to make the employers interested in their employment. And there are certain techniques that we may tell about already. The organizations, the collectives started addressing us regarding the trainings on how to communicate with the veterans, how to adapt the workplaces for them. And I want to say that the employers have to understand that they will have to create the barrier-free environment for the people who are about to come back. There is a question in the study concerns that many people with physical disabilities are about to come back, so barrier-free environment for the people is the first thing we should understand and that we should do. The Ministry for Veteran Affairs is implementing the pilot project, the Institute of Veteran Assistant, and the assistant will be tasked with supporting the veterans during their employment, informing them about their training opportunities, retraining opportunities, education, so they will become a bridge between the veteran and the employer, between the veteran and educational institution, because veterans know little about their opportunities, and that's one of the things that should be done by the colleagues present here, the mass media, so more people understand about their opportunities. There is the training program, there is professional adaptation program with the Ministry for Veteran Affairs, which is aimed at acquisition of new professions by the veterans for their retraining, short-term training programs, and so on and so forth. We've opened 4 centers for veteran development in the higher educational institutions where the programs will be developed for our defenders, our heroes. Our supporters will work there to orient their colleagues, their friends for professional adaptation and the needs in the regions. The regional policy is important there to understand what are the needs for employment in the communities where the veterans reside. We have to closely cooperate with the employment centers, with the community governments. I think when they extend vouchers for training, they orient for those professions. There is a number of projects by donor organizations and civil organizations, and I think in cooperation we will be able to prepare the workplaces for those who come back from the front lines, and we're getting ready for that. Ms. Ruslana, I would like to hear your opinion about this study and what are the steps to be taken now. Well, I'm about to jeopardize the situation just like always. First of all, we have to start living the real life. We have economic stagnation and things are about to get worse. The unemployment is high and it's growing. And the situation is about to deteriorate here too. We have a big shadow job market. We have a lot of clandestine labor relations, and the things are going to get worse here too. Any business, any employer is oriented at income and result, no matter what we're told, but in fact the things are like that, because shouldn't they be oriented at the income? We will have, or they will have nothing to pay their salaries with, salaries to their employees. So this statement fits perfectly to the fact that the majority of the employers were saying that to get stimulated to accept a veteran, to employ a veteran, they need some tax exemptions, but our businesses have to understand that we may implement tax exemptions when we don't have shadow job market, when we don't have clandestine labor relations. I'm talking about the private entrepreneurs and so on. The budget should be filled with something. Well, I will stand on the side of the business that they are waiting for the tax reform. You know, it's a vicious circle here. Well, someone else is waiting for the victory. The veterans are waiting to come back home. So once again, I'm reminding you, we should all get back to reality, and the things are as they are. The tax reform will be implemented when the state will be capable of doing so, because that list of exemptions, all those stimuli that everybody wants, or some citizens or certain categories of citizens want now, the state is not capable of implementing now. Well, regarding the employment of the veterans, as of the 1st January 2023, 186.5 persons were registered with the state employment centers. I'm reminding you, not all of the people sign up with the employment centers. and 70% of them are women. As of the 1st May 2023 until the 30th of March 2023, those who have combat experience are a little bit more than 8,118 only underwent professional retraining. Meanwhile, about 2,000 were employed. So again, officially unemployed are 8,911 people out of those who have combat experience. So where are the rest? So when we talk about some preferences and so on and so forth, we have to emphasize the efficient fulfillment of the budget programs, because the professional retraining was underwent by 118 persons. And about 2,000 were employed. So what those figures tell us about? Well, if I were an employment center, I would make some research. Maybe they need to improve their service function or something like that, because there is a problem and the figures clearly evidence it. We have to pay attention to the figures. We have to pay attention to reality. If we say that there are problems with the economy, you have to take the amount of the budget program. You have to see the result produced by the employment center. And let's see what's the KPI. So Miss Olga, let's talk about the processes that the civil society gets involved with and how efficient this work is. Well, good afternoon. I will represent the civil society today. The civil society gets included when they see that some processes may be improved or done in a different way. This is what happened with the mobilization. When the full-scale invasion has erupted, we've realized that people, to get from civil life to the armed forces, there were many people willing to do so, and to make it efficient we need to build some system of a different kind, and we have created it. We've launched a special website with the vacancies in the armed forces on the platform of LobbyX, and us as a socially responsible business, socially responsible company, we undertake the obligation and responsibility not only to transform a person, to provide them with the opportunity to find themselves in the armed forces, but in the same way to get back, to help them find their place in the civil life after they come back from the military service after our victory. So the civil society plays an important role generally in the process of adaptation of the military and veterans in their social lives, and to significant extent the employment is a part of this process. The veterans themselves say that they most likely will address the civil organizations, non-government organizations that would support them in retraining, in search of their place, and so on and so forth. So I agree with Ruslana. If we talk about reality here, we should mention that the businesses do not pick among the large number of candidates. We see the unemployment is peaking and the structure of the market is changing. There is unmatch or mismatch between the demand from the point of view of the unemployed, those looking for jobs, and proposition by the employers. So us as a government, at the civil society, we need to make sure we are flexible, we are retrained, and we to find our role in the civil life, in the military life, in accordance with the needs of today. This is why the role of the civil society is important. We work on that, and us as the society, we keep track of a number of initiatives, just like Ms. Svitlana has mentioned. Both local organizations and global international organizations are already working on training of employers in adaptation programs, in working with the veterans to support them, to help them find their role, their place in the civil life, to help them retrain, re-educate. So that's the bilateral process, in fact, because it's not only the employers and the government and the civil society who are supposed to create the opportunities for the veterans, but also the veterans are supposed to want to and to be morally ready to change something in their lives, to find jobs and to be happy, because employment is a major part of our lives. And if we exercise our potential, we undergo this adaptation period easier, we feel ourselves necessary, and we realize that our sacrifices were not in vain. What we're due is done to improve the society. Thank you very much, Mr. Maxim. I would like to ask you, as a person who works with those who look for jobs and who offer jobs, what's your experience of cooperation with the veterans? What can you say based on your experience? Thank you very much. I would like to thank the colleagues who cover this topic. It's very important for Ukraine. I've prepared a story with figures and facts, and I will pick in my presentation a little bit. So I'll try to explain it clearly. First of all, let's start from the beginning of the year 2022. The website work.ua is the biggest in Ukraine. We work with more than 40,000 employers. More than 4 million of Ukrainians visit us on a monthly basis, and we can say that it may serve as an indicator for the job market in Ukraine. So some positive moments: we had more than 100,000 vacancies on our website. During the invasion, this number fell more than 10 times, and the minimal indicator was 6,000. That was a dramatic fall. And then month by month, the success of the armed forces of Ukraine allowed the job market to develop. And for the time being, this summer, we have the resumption of about 93,000 vacancies, which account for 90%. Well, there is unemployment, but it's lower than in 2022, and the jobs are available. Well, talking about competition and those looking for jobs, during the invasion, it has grown 5 times. There were vacancies with about 100 candidates competing, but now the competition is so low that it's even lower than during pre-war time, and the employers are facing the deficit of qualified personnel. To understand their job market before the full-scale invasion, I'll give you the figures now by different agencies and experts. So before the full-scale invasion, there were around 17.5 million of capable candidates in Ukraine. The amount of ATO veterans was about 450,000. Now the Ministry of Economy forecasts that within 10 years we will need to look for 4.5 million employees in the job market or workers, and the deficit of capable population is about minus 30%. So the job market has recovered 90%, and the deficit of capable population is still 30%. So the deficit of personnel, skilled personnel, is existing now, and this situation will be only developing. So talking about the forecast by the number of veterans, the figures differ, but in average it's about 1,700,000. As you understand, it's 10% of the capable population. If previously veteran was 1 in 40, 1 in 30 employees and workers, now 1 in 10 will be veterans. So the businesses will be facing it, and we have to realize it. Well, by the results of the study, we see that 60% didn't have experience of working with the veterans, and they didn't have experience of recruiting veterans. However, at the same time, those companies that worked with the veterans, they evaluate the experience of such interaction as positive. More than half of them, 22%, evaluated as neutral, and some insignificant fraction, 10%, evaluated as negative, which corresponds the average figure. Well, as to the characteristics emphasized by the employers, the active social position, discipline, and, as it was mentioned, emotional instability. For the time being, it's biased, because we see that many employers, or the majority of the employers, evaluate the experience of interaction as possible and only minor fraction as non-satisfactory. So bias is something that we will have to work with. Regarding the characteristics that will make the veterans stand out is the teamwork, critical thinking, driving of military vehicles, and critical thinking is one of the main characteristics highlighted by the World Labor Organization as a key skills. So those skills are in demand among the employers. It's necessary to understand that. And regarding the necessity of implementation of adaptation programs with the businesses, we see that the businesses are not yet ready for that. Some might say that they should be implemented as demobilized employees come back, and some say that it should be done right upon the mobilization. But the fact is that the adaptation programs should be implemented right now, because the veterans come back gradually, and to be ready to meet them, we need to implement those programs. They are related, first of all, to the communication. The society is supposed to accept the veterans, and the first ones to do it should be the businesses, because there's a large number of employers working with the businesses. It's a major fraction of the society, and us, just like now, we donate, and we feel it as a part of our responsibility. In the same way, each of us should become a volunteer at our own level to support the veterans in their reintegration, and we are the ones who are supposed to make the first step, because different categories, depending on the extent of integration of the categories of population into the life of the society, the more successful is the country. Thank you very much. Thank you. Vitaly Kucherenko is supposed to be joining us online. Mr. Vitaly, if you're with us, can you please let us know? Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Good afternoon. Yes, we can hear you. I hope you've heard what we were talking about here. You're a veteran who is planning to employ about 1,000 veterans. Can you please share your experience with us, and why do you put emphasis on the veterans specifically now? Once again, good afternoon to all of those present. I was listening to all the speakers quite attentively, and I can say that I was in the situation of both of a veteran and as an employer and as the one being employed, so I know the situation from both sides. Why there is emphasis on employment of the veterans? I can understand it because after their return to the civil life, to the peaceful life, the servicemen, the former servicemen, they face a number of significant problems that, well, they face significant problems with employment. Many employers, they did not wish to accept retired military, to employ retired military, specifically those who were taking part in combat operations due to their psychological condition. There are certain concerns on the part of the employers in this aspect. Well, they shouldn't be afraid of it, but certain work needs to be done in this area, both with the retired military and with the employers. That business that I have established, the mines or the mining activity is something that is of demand today. And the personnel reserve that we count on are the retired military. The military who get retired and who try to get employed. We offer the full range. Our training center has trained 143 deminers, including 23 veterans. 23 veterans were trained at our own expense. They work with a number of companies which are currently involved in mining activity, like Trust, International Demining Group. One, two, Mr. Vitaly, we're not hearing you. Okay, can you hear me? Hello? Yeah, the connection is back on. Can you hear me now? Yeah, we can hear you. I'm hoping you're hearing us as well. I'm having technical problems here. So we continue offering and those opportunities to the veterans, and we continue employing them. Employment in the area of mine action is a teamwork, is their responsibility. All those characteristics are inherent in our brothers in arms. This is why I think that it's in high demand. There is support by the People's Deputies of Ukraine. For example, Igor Gerasimenko, the hero of Ukraine, a former battalion commander of 95th Brigade, is the support by the Department of Social Policy of Zhytomyr Regional Council, and there are certain movements in this area. We plan. The only problem of ours that doesn't allow us to expand our framework is the absence of funding, but we continue looking for funding, and I hope that we are about to increase the number of trained deminers among retired military and increase the number of those employed. We also emphasize during employment that are those of our brothers in arms should be employed who are partially disabled, like amputees. They can be engaged in different processes that may be of use to the society, and at the same time they may feel needed by the society. For example, informing of mine threats, non-technical examination, we may involve them in such procedures, and I hope that will be positive for them, for those coming to us, and for those processes in general. Thank you very much, Mr. Vitaly. Thank you for sharing your experience. Before we proceed to the questions from the floor, I would like to ask the panelists, based on what we've seen from the figures provided by Mr. Maxim and Ms. Yulia, we see there is a huge potential among the employers who never had any point of contact with veterans. About 60% of employers are such, and in my opinion it might be a hypothesis, but it's a huge potential to work with these people. So what is your experience? How can we work with them? Ms. Ruslana described one of the ways. It's a material way, but I'm sure, and our society has demonstrated it multiple times, that non-material motivation works for us even better. So what are the steps we should take to work with that category of audience? I will start, if I'm allowed. We were questioning the employers during one of the events about the ways of overcoming the deficit of qualified personnel. First was to invest in training of those employers who stay inside the country. The second one was implementation of technologies, and third was adaptation of, or implementation of adaptation programs for the veterans, because they are a significant fraction of working age population. So on one side, for the businesses, the interest is in helping the country. It will be a social responsibility of the businesses to avoid the social crisis. Another important moment, and it's in the best interests of the business, that the veterans will make a part of working age population who wield unique skills and knowledge that can be integrated into business to develop it. So there is a direct interest of the businesses here. So this is my comment. Maybe someone else wants to comment. I would like to say that the employers should be responsible. There was a slide there demonstrated when they should prepare for the veterans to be coming back. They should start preparing now. They should start preparing their HRs. They should prepare their barrier-free space, and they should orient at the strategy, the economic strategy, the communities development strategy. We should focus on the new professions that our state will need, and the veterans, they wield such skills, and we have to understand what are the sectors that where the veterans can fulfill their duties in professional manner. We have to rely upon that experience, and just like one of the panelists said, he organized a demining business, and the experience of the veterans will be in demand there just like never. And the education, yes, education for employers and the veterans, we have to continue developing. We have to react to the challenges of the society and the challenges faced by our state. Thank you very much, dear friends. If you have any questions or comments, please join our conversation. Good afternoon, Maria Shenkarenko, Ukrinform. As we know, many of our defenders, after the end of their military service, after demobilization, they want to start their own businesses. The government supports them. We know there is a number of state grants to support the retired military in founding their businesses. But in your opinion, what are the types of economic activity to be picked by the retired veterans? Thank you. Well, look, I can tell you about top three sectors that the veterans found their businesses in. That's the services, mills, and the industrial military complex. So and the agricultural business. Basically, you have to look at the market, because many veterans, they were doing something else. You know, one of the veterans, they have a business. He was working with the counterintelligence, and he had Vyshyvanka shirts. So now he is making the military uniforms. So the specifics of the veteran business is that they can adapt to the conditions, and where some regular businesses may get stalled, just like the colleagues from Work UA have told us that some businesses started decreasing the number of positions, and the veteran businesses, they can survive in difficult conditions. They may relocate, they may employ more employees, and even expand during the war. Thank you. We have more questions on the floor. Good afternoon. After service charity fund, well, it was discussed a lot about the support of the veterans and the retraining, and why the businesses do not want to employ the veterans. And I'm asking myself that question: has anybody from the government started forming the state employment? Because the employers themselves, they not only don't want to employ a retired military, but they even pick very thoroughly among just regular people. We cannot idealize everybody. Yes, they are heroes, they are defenders, but we cannot guarantee that each of them will be a high-skilled employee or worker. And when we will have to say goodbye at some stage, the employers will find it difficult, specifically because of the state labor service, because it involves trials, protocols, and they have to prove that that employee is not fit for employment. So maybe there is some work going on with the state employment service. Well, look, we have legislation in effect. We have to comply with it. We have the code of labor laws. And if we talk about such top strategic and global topic in this code of labor, we have to segregate a chapter about the veterans and employment of veterans, and to describe the procedures, how it should be happening. There are chapters dedicated to other categories or groups of population, but we do not segregate veterans anywhere apart from our specific legislation. And it's not right, because the code of labor is the codified legislative act. The microphone, please. Well, one way or another, I'm just asking whether someone was thinking about it. If the employers are waiting for their tax exemptions, that is something obsolete. I was working with this state labor service, and it's Soviet Union there. They're sitting somewhere. If I'm not mistaken, there is a moratorium for their inspection in effect now. So they should be reformatted one way or another. Well, I think that there are no representatives of this agency here. Maybe we should invite some of them for the next time. But now I'm talking as an employer. For me, what was important was the skills and qualification. And talking about qualification, the people either acquire those skills and knowledge and get employed, or inside of the collective we create the conditions to make sure the people are developing and training. So it's a two-sided road. We should understand that the employers don't employ veterans just because they are veterans. We have more questions. Good afternoon. Fact and newspaper. I would like to ask Ms. Svitlana about the Institute of Mentors. So is it only enthusiasm? Is it only offered by one person, or are there any training programs in place? And what in fact will they be capable of doing? What actually you expect from them? How they will be of help? Well, that's a number of questions here already. So when I was talking about Kirill, that's organization inside the working collective, a mentor inside his working collective who helps other veterans who get employed. He helps them to get reintegrated into civil lives. That's initiative of the company. It has nothing to do with the Institute of the Veteran Assistant. It's just an example of how the employers organize the work with the veterans for the time being. What is the experience they study now, what they want to implement to make sure that the veterans feel it easier to integrate. So talking about the Veteran Assistant Institute, it's a pilot project that will be in place until the 1st of January. We have to analyze, we have to monitor the activity, the results, and we have to create the document that will be implemented better based on the results we get upon the pilot project. So pilot project will be in place for a couple of months. This year we've picked 4 regions, and there were 4 and more communities picked in every region who submitted for this project. So there will be offices founded in the communities that will coordinate the veteran policy and implement the veteran policy and coordinate the activities of the veteran assistants. Now the jobs classifier was added with the profession as a specialist on support of the veterans and demobilized individuals. It's important that the professions classifier will list such type of job. The veteran assistant during the pilot project is being picked from veterans, from retired veterans or members of their families. It involves tests of the knowledge of constitution, state policy, veteran policy, psychological tests. Then there are direct interviews and picking by commissions who pick the candidates for training, and another stage is the training on the basis of the centers of the veteran training in those regions, and then there is yet another test, yet another interview, and then from the 1st of October we hope our veteran assistants will start working in the communities. Their main task will be meeting and accompaniment of the family members of the veterans, supports them in any procedures such as documents processing, communication with the government authorities, with the government agencies, communication in different stages and phases of reintegration of the veteran, the support in employment, communication with the government agencies, representation of the veterans' interests in different areas. That's in brief. If you have any more questions, I can answer them. I would like to thank our speakers for this comprehensive conversation. I would like to thank the journalists for the interest to this topic. We remember that every rehabilitation, reintegration, and adaptation is then active movement in both sides and in both directions. And as Mr. Maxim has mentioned, that the first step should be taken by the civil society and the government to support our defenders. So thank you for the interest to this topic. We want to thank the armed forces for opportunity to hold events like that, and glory to Ukraine.